Hello, I'm KallaTheYapper, and I'm back with another video. For today's video, I'm going to be giving my opinion on why I believe that Natlan's design didn't click with many players who were excited for it. So I'm going to use 4 points that sum up people's overall dissatisfaction with Natlan and explain why they were dissatisfied. These are the 4 points: expectations, character design, land/region design, story/voice acting. We'll touch on the first point and move on from there. So let's get started. I think we can all agree that we had a different view of what Natlan would look like based on the Teyvat chapter storyline preview, Ian-san's first appearance, descriptions of the Marjovari, the design of Vanessa and her tribespeople from the Genshin Impact manga that came out before the game was released, and finally Nouvelette's description of Natlan at the end of the Fontaine Archon quest. Now, let's run the gauntlet. The Teyvat chapter storyline preview, my apologies, gave the impression that Natlan had an internal conflict amongst its native people, which turned out not to be the case since the theme of Natlan's story was nature versus man and not man versus man. The first Natlan character to ever be revealed, that being Ian-san, set the expectation of what Natlan characters would look like. This also applies to Vanessa's character design from the Genshin Impact manga. I'll go more in depth about expectations for Natlan character designs in the next point. The description of the Marjovari that's been in the game ever since version 1 also gave players the impression that not only was it a wasteland without wind, but potentially Natlan as an entire nation was as well, since it's called the Nation of War and Fire. So when we arrived in Natlan, many players were dissatisfied since it didn't match their headcanon of what Natlan should have looked like. Players expected a battle-torn landscape, but instead were greeted with a colorful and vibrant place along with dragon-type Pokemon. So because of these various reasons, I believe these are the reasons that Natlan failed to meet high expectation of players it had built up over the long years before its arrival. Now for the next point, character designs. I'll say this right now, I personally don't have an issue with any of the character designs from Natlan. However, I can see why others did and either quit the game because of it or felt that Genshin had lost the magical charm that came with the character designs. Basically, Genshin's characters from each and every region before Natlan had this fantastical feel to them, which I can agree with. Let's look at some examples of these fantastical looking characters. From Mondstadt, Liyue, Inazuma, Sumeru, and Fontaine. Each character from previous regions has an element of similarity to them, and it is extremely noticeable. In comparison, Natlan characters don't have a concrete similarity between them, from Mulani to Aoife. Some of them dress in modern styled clothing, others dress in traditional tribal clothing, or they have a mixture of both. I believe with certainty that the lack of core similarity between Natlan character designs had an impact on players not feeling Natlan's vibe. I'd argue that if Natlan characters were designed with more or just with scars, like Razor, Bennett, Aoife, and Risley, or better yet, even dressed in similar fashion to Citlali, Razor, Ian-san, and Bennett, I do think that players would have enjoyed the Natlan characters even more if those elements were used more so, right? I'll give my opinion on other aspects related to this point. I personally don't have a hate boner for the Natlan designs, as I stated before, for the most part. However, there are things worth criticizing, like Mavwika's outfit. The zipper is already crazy enough as it is. Here's another point. Why didn't they just use the outfit that she wore 500 years ago? I would have loved to see Mavwika in her old outfit that had a more tribal feel to it compared to her current one. Also, I don't like the fact that the Aztec-looking sundial is hidden behind her hair. They should have shown it off more in relation to her Archon authority and the real-life cultural inspiration it had, in my opinion. Right? They could have used the sundial as the device that either summoned or transformed into her flame strider. On the topic of Mavuika's bike, they most definitely shouldn't have waited to reveal that Mavuika had such a vehicle. It should have been shown when we saw Mavuika fight the captain for the first time, because that fight set the expectation of what Mavuika's gameplay would be like, right? Because everyone thought that she was going to be flying around, throwing punches, throwing her shirt around, doing all type of crazy stuff. And instead, she's fighting with a bike, which throws a lot of people off on that, right? I'll go in more depth about the technology aspect in the next section. But overall, to finish off this section, yeah, Mavuika's outfit, it really gave, and not just her outfit, but her gameplay also gave people, oh, hold up, let me correct myself. Her outfit, her character, her personal character writing, and her playstyle gave lots of people more reasons to not like Natlan, which is a shame, but you can't do nothing about that. That's the fault of the devs. Now, on to the next section. Now, for the land design for Natlan, in my opinion, it's a coin flip. You either love it or you hate it, just like any other region of the game. But I do think it's worth mentioning, again, that the expectations that players have built up over the years from things like the descriptions of the Majorvari, Natlan's Archon Quest description from Dainsliff, Yensan's first character appearance, and finally, the title given to Natlan being a nation of war played a big role in players' dissatisfaction with the design of Natlan. I do think it's fair that a nation given the label of war and fire should have had areas showing off that a war did and still is ravaging Natlan, instead of flexing to the players that Natlan has a love for extreme sports mixed into their warrior culture. They could have given us abyssal contaminated, areas like in Sumeru with the Withering, or the Majorvari being an area to explore, which is described as a sea of ashes where the wind doesn't blow. It would have been a perfect tone setter for the Natlan Archon Quest. I really hope that the Majorvari gets added before we head off into Nogcry. Honestly, it should have been available when 5.0 dropped at the bare minimum. Now, let's touch up on the technology aspect of Natlan. I'm going to keep it 100% with y'all. I'm going to keep it real. At first, I defended the technology aspect of Natlan, but now I've changed my opinion on it. To be clear, I don't believe that it shouldn't have existed within a tribal setting. Take Horizon Zero Dawn, for example. It clearly can work for a setting for Natlan, or something similar like Natlan's, my bad. The only issue that I and many others have is that the technology wasn't integrated properly into the world building within the boundaries of the main Archon Quest, or rather the world building as of Genshin as a whole, right? It's clear that the people of Natlan have used the technology left behind from the dragons to create such weapons and gadgets, but it's not mentioned or brought up in the main story, which is bad. The world quest in Natlan does a better job explaining and showing off the technology than the main story. Take a look at Ochka Natlan. It's literally called the City of Machinery, and there's legit crazy machinery and mechanics left all around Ochka Natlan if you go exploring for it, right? After exploring the new area in Natlan, aka the volcano, and the amount of times I've seen dragon tech that should have been all across Natlan since the beginning, like the flying serpents, dragon, puppets, and so on, it reaffirms my belief that they should have used the dragon technology as the technology that the people of Natlan have been using since the first reveal of them. In my opinion, they should have kept that style of like stone with like lava markings, like the one I'm showing on screen right now. That's basically what they should have kept as the technology that the playable characters use, right? In my opinion. Now, let's continue. Additionally, Mavuika's character info revealing or relating to her bike reveals how she not only found blueprints for it, but also how she salvaged parts from the dragon technology. She even needed Shalonen's help for help forging the pieces that she couldn't find for her bike. The info even reveals the thought process that Mavuka had for the idea of a fast-moving gadget that would help her reach the battlefield faster when the Abyss inevitably attacked. My bad, I can't pronounce that word properly. This would have been great to have fleshed out in the main story, where they hid her bike the entire time until the final act. Like, come on, there's no justification for why Natlan's technology had so little impact in the story compared to Sumeru and Fontaine's technology. I can guarantee that Nodcry's tech will have more thought and care put into it in comparison to Natlan's. My bad, I'm stuttering. Anyway, as I'm typing the script, it feels like Natlan was sacrificed for Nodcry's arrival. That's what it feels like to me personally. Now, on to the next point. Now we've reached the final section, which is the most important in my opinion. As much as I enjoyed Natlan's story for what it was, I do agree with the criticisms that players had for it. For example, why didn't Natlan not have the same quality of writing as Sumeru and Fontaine had prior? Why does it feel like everyone is partying all the time when there's a supposed war going on against the Abyss? Why did the writers make Mavuka damn near flawless and not have a personal struggle that was worth attaching to, like Nahida's lack of self-confidence in relation to her feeling that she wasn't worthy to be Sumeru's Archon, since the sages preferred Rukkhadevata, or Farina's personal pain that she was hiding that was a direct result of her keeping a secret so close to her chest that it brought emotional pain for her for 500 years, believing that if she told anyone that they'd die if she spoke, right? Another question, like, that's good. Why didn't the captain go against Mavuka's plan even harder? What was the point of saying that Mavuka would die, but instead killing off the captain who wasn't fleshed out enough to justify killing him? Things like that made players not enjoy Mavuka's character and Natlan's story even more so. The fact that Kachina seems to be the only character in the entirety of Natlan's Archon Quest to actually be fleshed out is kind of crazy. Having both good character motivation for why they want to defend their nation and development after completing her personal goals is pretty bad, not gonna lie. It's bad that it feels like she's the only one that is well written. It's even worse, or rather, it's even made worse when the limited time event that was for Hu Tao that came after the Archon Quest, which had multiple parallels to Natlan's Archon Quest, was better written both in character writing and story. I couldn't help but make comparisons between the limited time event story and the main story quest when I streamed it, and it felt as if whoever wrote Natlan's fifth act in particular wasn't the same individual to write Hu Tao's event story. I'll give a critique of Natlan's Archon Quest myself. Why weren't any of the Abyss monsters, beside the new ones, present in Act 4, or rather the entire Archon Quest? For example, the Abyss Lectors, Bishop, Rift Hounds, Breacher Primuses, Dark Serpent Knights, and Abyss Mages. Why are they not present in the story? Why didn't the heroes of Natlan's tribes have more impactful moments, right? In comparison, in the Amphorius 3.1 and 3.2 acts, you have the story take its time fleshing out their main characters since the start of the story. What's even crazier is that certain characters are being killed off, like Anaxa and Trian, or remain in a place that they can't leave from permanently, like Castris. And I'm certain that this will continue to be like this all the way to the end of Amphorius' story. As I look back on Natlan's Archon Quest, a lot of the main cast didn't really face many consequences. It would have been great to have some of the heroes die as a result of giving their power from their ancient names to Mavuka so that she'd have the power needed to dispel the Abyss from the entirety of Natlan. Or the chosen heroes could have taken the place of each of the tribe's personal Wyup and become new Wyups, especially considering the fact that the Wyups have the ability to manipulate the elements and are the guardians of the Night Kingdom. Granted, they'll need to do some rewriting to achieve this. I'll even puts more spice on this meal. Why did the Abyss Order not play a role in Natlan's Archon quest, especially after how the last interlude quest left off with the Luma Fate being completed and Lumine being indecisive on how she wants to use it? It would have been great if that played a role in Natlan's Archon quest, personally. Now, for the lack of voice acting throughout the majority of Natlan's story, I can't blame Genshin for this, but unfortunately it did have a negative impact on players' enjoyment of the story. Most characters started feeling like a reskinned traveler half of the time thanks to the lack of voice acting. I'm not going to go deep into the VA strike that occurred that caused this negative impact on Genshin's story. There are videos that explain the whole situation better than I can. Now that you've reached the end of my video, tell me if you agree with my observations or not. Hopefully I was able to convey my points clearly. Like, sub, and join the Discord if you want. The link is on my channel. Come chat if you want while I stream and give your opinions on these gacha games I play. I also have some other video ideas that I want to try and do. For example, the discussion around Skirk being made for a niche team and why I personally believe it's a good thing. Zenless HP inflation, why furries aren't problematic, and why WUWA status effects are bad game design. There are some other ideas too, but for now, I've already gotten started on the scripts for the previously mentioned videos, so look out for them down the line. This is KallaTheYapper signing out, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Goodbye, peace, and good night.